Officer Jason Ellis was ambushed and killed on his way home from work in May 2013. Despite following every dead-end trail, there have been no major breakthroughs or developments since the attack, leaving this case unsolved for 12 years. The community at large was shocked by the murder. Officer Jason Ellis also coached the Nelson County Little League team and was an active member in his church community, leaving many to wonder, why him? Little old Bardstown, Kentucky was now on edge. If such a beloved member of the community could be shot in cold blood, then anybody could be next. Welcome back, Scissor Sisters. If you live in the Ohio Valley, you have probably heard of this case at some point. In fact, when I mentioned to my mom that my next episode would be about an unsolved murder in Bardstown, she immediately knew who I was talking about. My mom even has her own ideas about who's responsible for the murder. Having graduated about 45 minutes or so from Bardstown, I was absolutely floored to discover that I had never heard of this case before. So, everyone say thank you to Aunt B on TikTok for suggesting this case, and maybe say thank you to Mama Crafty as well for guiding me down this rabbit hole. If you haven't seen my last 3 episodes or so, I am currently working on making some daisy square overalls for my daughter without any real plan of how to put it all together because I thrive on chaos. I am going to finish sewing panels together today, try to join the legs, and maybe even make the straps. We'll see. I am really hoping to wrap this project up soon because I am kind of over it. Crafters will understand. Law enforcement believes that Jason's murder may be the first in a string of 3 unsolved homicides, though the connections are tenuous at best. Jason's story tends to get lost inside a more sensational and shocking story. Instead of pulling extra drama into this episode, I'm just going to give the facts of one puzzling unsolved case. And with that, let's get into it, Scissor Sisters. Jason Ellis is an Ohio native, born to Charles and Pam Ellis on September 22nd, 1979. He grew up in Cincinnati with his 2 sisters, Kelly and Lacey, and seemingly had a loving family and normal childhood. He had hobbies, friends, and was a popular high school athlete. His friends consistently described him as one of the most selfless people anyone could ever meet. While I didn't know him, I can see where that sentiment came from. Jason's last moments alive were spent in service to the public, making this murder even more tragic. Jason took a particular interest in baseball during his lifetime. He would carry this passion with him literally forever. He played baseball for his high school, where he won Player of the Year at the Queen City Conference in 1998. He then went on to play college baseball at the University of the Cumberlands in Williamsburg, Kentucky, where he broke nearly all of the school's career records. Eventually, Jason made it to minor league baseball, playing for the Cincinnati Reds minor league team from 2003 to 2004 in Sarasota, Florida. He also found time to play minor league baseball for the Montana Billings Mustangs, which I've been told is also one of the Cincinnati Reds minor league teams. I don't know how to read baseball stats, but I hope the stats on the screen mean something to someone. And all of this was before he settled into his career as a police officer. He even coached the Nelson County Little League team with one of his friends and colleagues during his time in public service. Jason really loved baseball and his community. Did I mention he was also an active member of his church? I really don't think free time existed for him. Not only was Jason's baseball career impressive, but so was his police record. Jason served as a police officer for 7 years, during which time he received the Governor's Award for Impaired Driving Enforcement in 2007 and 2008. He was also named Officer of the Year in 2008, which is also the same year he became Bardstown's first narcotics canine handler. The sweet puppers he got was a German Shepherd named Vigo. Jason's impressive 7 years on the force highlights just how much he genuinely cared for people and for his community. Jason's friends, coworkers, and family describe him as the type of person who would give you the shirt off his back and called him incredibly likable. His fellow officers even claimed that the folks he arrested tended to like him. So, how did this pillar of the community meet his demise? Before addressing that, let's get some perspective on the area. Bardstown is honestly kind of cute and quaint, but being the home of a distillery, I can tell you that the town does kind of smell bad. Sorry, Bardstown. The town is located in Nelson County in the northern central area of the state, approximately 15 miles from I-65. During the 2020 census, the town boasted a population of nearly 14,000 people. The town Jason lived in, Chaplin, Kentucky, is about 17 miles from Bardstown and takes about 23 minutes to drive. Chaplin hasn't had a census since 2010, but the population at that time was under 500 people. With such small populations in this area, it's not hard to imagine tight-knit communities, which explains why everyone was so shocked over this murder. On May 25th, 2013, Officer Jason Ellis wrapped up his final shift with the Bardstown Police Department a little later than usual. He had made a late-night arrest and had stayed late to finish the paperwork. He left the station just before 2 a.m. in a police pool cruiser, which just means he left in one of the fleet vehicles. And That's just a complicated way of saying a pool cruiser isn't assigned to any one officer like a stereotypical cruiser would be. Now, the devil in the detail about the pool car as opposed to the personally assigned vehicle is that pool cars in the Bardstown Police Department didn't have dash cams. It's actually pretty common in small towns to have pool cars as opposed to personally assigned vehicles. It's more cost efficient for a community with a smaller population and with lower crime rates for police departments to be structured like that. I'll let you be the decider of whether or not a dash cam would help solve this case or not, though. After leaving the station late, Jason began the half-hour drive home to Chaplin, Kentucky. His wife, 2 young sons, and Figo were waiting for him. Do you think his wife, Amy, stayed up that night waiting for him? Or do you think she found out when one of Jason's fellow officers knocked on her door to inform her? Either way, that's the absolute worst way to start your day. Around 2:30 in the morning, Jason pulled off the Bluegrass Parkway and on to exit 34. At the top of the ramp, Jason noticed tree limbs blocking the road. Being dedicated to civil service, Officer Jason Ellis blocked the exit with his cruiser, flipped the cruiser lights on, donned his ballistics vest, and went to work clearing the limbs. Unfortunately, a ballistics vest only covers the chest. As Jason moved the first armful of limbs to the side of the road, a shotgun blast rang out. The buckshot tore through the officer's exposed head, neck, and shoulders. You know, spots where vital organs and major arteries are located, but unprotected by ballistics wear. Officer Ellis crumpled, likely already dead. His service weapon never left its holster. More gun blasts rang out before the night fell silent. Within minutes of the ambush, a woman drove up the Bluegrass Parkway and waited at the bottom of the ramp. She had no reason to suspect that the officer was dead. At 2:36 a.m., a man joined the woman at the bottom of the ramp, except he didn't stay in his car. The man walked up the ramp, either to talk to the officer or to help clear the road, and found Jason bleeding on the ground. Jason had fallen on top of the limbs he carried. The man sprang into action. He ran and told the woman to call for help before sprinting back to Jason's side. The Good Samaritan tried to stop the blood flow while the woman ran up the hill and grabbed the radio from the patrol car, calling for help and stating that an officer had been shot. By 2:40 a.m., a state trooper had responded to the call. The entire event lasted 10 minutes. Some deity was looking out for Jason because, let's be honest, how many people are really traveling that late at night? What are the chances 3 people needed to take the same ramp all within 5 minutes of each other at 2:30 in the morning? Kentucky State Trooper Mike Garyantes was the first officer on the scene. 2 Bardstown police officers, Michael Medley and Andrew Riley, arrived just hours later. By 11 a.m., 50 law enforcement vehicles from across the state had arrived to escort their fallen comrade to his autopsy in Jefferson County. For those not from Kentucky, Jefferson County houses Louisville, which is really the only city worth going to, honestly. The coroner had a cause of death by the end of day, which was still May 25th, by the way. Unfortunately, Jason's autopsy didn't really provide investigators with any information they didn't already have. The coroner was able to determine that Jason was shot multiple times with a 12-gauge shotgun from an upward trajectory, and that's it. The police's last remaining hope for identifying a suspect came down to the tree limbs on the road, though it didn't take them very far. The only thing they gleaned from the discarded and bloodied vegetation is that it wasn't native to the area, which is honestly kind of a vague sentence. Chinese tallow trees aren't native to my area, but they grow everywhere around here, and they grow very quickly. So, what does that statement mean in this context? But that's really all the information there is on Jason's murder. Over the next few days, 2 separate law enforcement agencies released statements claiming that Jason's murder was a premeditated ambush with Jason as the intended target. Within 2 days of the murder, a $6,000 reward was offered for information. By June 2nd, 2013, $100,000 had been raised for reward money. On May 30th, 2013, Officer Jason Ellis was laid to rest in Chaplin, Kentucky. The Bardstown Police Department refused to leave their fallen brother alone until his funeral. For 5 days, members of law enforcement sat with Jason's body at the funeral home in shifts until his interment. Amidst all the tears and heavy hearts, the family and police force made sure that Figo was present for his handler's funeral. Figo put his paws on the casket as it was lowered and whined, touching the hearts of everyone who watched. Figo was retired from the police force shortly after and given to the Ellis family. Figo died 4 years later, just days before the anniversary of Jason's death. On June 18, 2013, law enforcement had to swallow their pride. Less than a month into their investigation, police had run out of leads and trails to follow. So, they did what every police station does and appealed to the public for help, something they've done frequently for this case over the years. Amy, Jason's wife, has pleaded publicly on more than one occasion for someone to say something because someone has to know something. And, while that's fair, it's also not really helpful. The public has next to no explanation about what happened, other than that it happened. Personally, I think that if law enforcement really wants the public's help, they need to ask more specific questions or give them something more tangible to think back on. People don't know what they don't know, and if they don't know what information is important, they can't help. I mean, the police haven't even specified what non-native vegetation was found at the scene. My only guess as to why they refuse to release that information is that it's the only thing they have and they're using it to cross-reference any valid tips they get. Still, a lack of public information is extremely unhelpful when asking the public for help. So, unlike law enforcement, I'm going to tell you that if you had any landscaping done around that time, had shrubs or small trees go missing, or noticed unusual tree trimming activity, email that information to the official Jason Ellis tip line on the screen. If you were out on the Bluegrass Parkway late that night and noticed a stopped logging truck or a weirdly parked vehicle near exit 34, email it to the tip line. If you noticed any vehicle with tree limbs falling out of a truck bed, email it to the tip line. I believe that every family with a missing or murdered loved one deserves closure. It has been 12 years since the incident that claimed the life of a small-town police officer and pillar of the community. Bardstown police claim they still get tips sent to their inbox, but nothing has led anywhere thus far. Apparently, there's an uptick in reports and tips around the anniversary of his death every year. And honestly, that sounds less like an influx of tips and more like pranks or check-ins from concerned citizens. Remember, guys, people are way braver behind a screen. So now that you know what happened, let's break down the only theory presented by law enforcement. Not gonna lie, Scissor Sisters, it's gonna be kind of a hot take. Hold on to your scissors and hooks. The first thing you need to know about this theory is that it potentially connects to the disappearance of a Bardstown woman from 2015 and the murder of her father in 2016. I'm not going to say too much about them because, well, this episode isn't about them. Jason's story gets buried enough as it is. The second thing you need to know is why it's believed the cases are connected. If you grew up in a small town, then you know that everyone knows everyone somehow, and Bardstown is no exception. At the time of his demise, Jason had a coworker by the name of Nick Hawk. Nick's brother, Brooks Hawk, happened to be dating the missing woman at the time she disappeared. Her father also lived in Bardstown and died in an ambush attack in 2016. So while everyone swears the cases are connected, the similarities are pretty superficial. Law enforcement is hesitant to officially link the cases, but several investigators and attorneys connected to the case have stated that they expect pieces to begin falling into place now that there's been a conviction for the missing woman from 2015. But how could the arrest of someone else's killer bring justice to an unsolved murder from 12 years ago? Easy. It's rumored that the missing woman, her boyfriend, and his brother were all part of a local drug ring, and Officer Jason Ellis was getting close to busting the ring. He had a narcotics dog, after all. To protect themselves and their means of income, someone sat on a hilltop to ambush and kill Jason. The group would have had insider knowledge of Jason's investigations and schedule because Nick Hawk was a police officer and would have worked with Jason. The one thing every agency involved agrees on, even now, is that this was a premeditated attack with Jason as the intended victim. They know he was killed and where, but they just can't seem to get a grasp on who or why. Truthfully, I can see why law enforcement believes the attack was premeditated, but I'm not sure if I fully believe it. Obviously, because I love being problematic, I don't really buy into the drug ring theory. The connections are tentative at best, and even law enforcement won't formally link the cases. Maybe there's an ounce of truth somewhere in the story, but I highly doubt it's the full truth. So let's dissect the connections. Bardstown houses less than 14,000 people. There are only so many places to go and so many people to know in those types of towns. Even if you don't know somebody directly, someone you know knows them. That's just how it is. So, the connections being that everyone knew each other or knew of each other is unsurprising. Living in a small town with a shocking crime where the victim potentially knew their killer or the friends of their killer doesn't really warrant suspicion. Proximity only strengthens the case if there are other major connections as well. And, as you're about to find out, there aren't any. Now let's take a look at the crimes themselves. Jason was ambushed and killed with a shotgun just off the side of the Bluegrass Parkway. The missing woman's body was never found, so while we don't know how she died, we do know that she was kidnapped from the side of the Bluegrass Parkway. The third victim, the missing woman's father, was ambushed and shot in the chest with a rifle while out hunting. There's no consistency between methods of isolating and killing the victims. That's enough to cast doubt for me. When you dig into the case of the missing woman just a little more, the differences become even more stark, but I'll save her story for another day. Now that it's broken down like that, do you see why it's a bit of a stretch to connect the three cases? Or are you still on Team Drug Ring? Let me know in the comments. So, if I don't quite believe the popular theory, what do I think happened? Honestly, it's hard to say. I've spent all month postulating with friends and family about what may have happened, but there's not one answer I find that would satisfy the case facts, not that there's any to begin with. I do believe that this was a premeditated ambush to an extent, but I don't believe the attack was targeted. There are simply too many things that could have gone wrong for this trap to be for one specific person. For example, Jason left work late the night he passed. If the trap had been meant for him, how far in advance was it set? Setting the trap ahead of time and waiting for the intended victim to pull up would have risked exposure. The longer they waited for the intended victim, the higher the chances were that they'd be seen. Jason had gotten off work late that night, so they would have been waiting uncomfortably long regardless. Would the attackers have moved the limbs and brush from the road if anyone besides Jason had pulled up? Remember, 2 other people had gotten onto exit 34 within minutes of Jason arriving. If the woman in the Corolla had pulled on first, would she have been shot instead? What about the man who pulled onto the ramp after that? How did they know it was Jason in the cruiser and not someone else? There are simply too many things that could have and should have gone wrong for me to believe this attack was meant for someone specific. However, I'm willing to admit that this explanation isn't perfect. If it was premeditated without a specific victim in mind, then the results would have been anarchy, and that doesn't fit here either. Realistically, how many anarchists are out there just killing just for killing's sake? My guess would probably be pretty few. Mr. Crafty posited that perhaps it was a trafficking attempt gone wrong, but again, it doesn't explain all the valid points we just discussed. Additionally, the Bluegrass Parkway is approximately 15 miles off of I-65, which would correspond with about a 30-minute drive. While I-65 is a favorite for traffickers, parkways generally aren't. Traffickers would have a much easier time picking victims off the interstate at truck stops or restaurants versus 15 miles away on a dark highway where you can't be sure who or what you'll encounter, or if you'll even see anyone at all along that road that late at night. That doesn't even include the amount of exposure a drawn-out operation like that would require. Logistically, I don't think a trafficking attempt gone wrong would fit this scenario. Mr. Crafty also pointed out that it could come down to how experienced the traffickers are, how risk-adverse they are. Regardless, I'm not fully on board with this theory either. A friend of mine suggested that perhaps a truck hauling logs took the exit and some of the branches and limbs fell off and blocked the exit. When Jason flipped the cruiser lights on, it startled a poacher who shot the officer to avoid getting in legal trouble. It's a decent theory, but it doesn't explain why the shooter waited until Jason had his arms full of debris before popping off a shot, or why the officer was shot multiple times. And, believe it or not, Mama Crafty is actually still Team Drug Ring. It just goes to show you how truly perplexing this case is. We discussed 4 totally different theories today, and not a single one fully makes sense. At least not with the limited information that we have. Do you see why I said there doesn't really seem to be a good theory? It has been 12 and a half years since Officer Jason Ellis was murdered, and no one is any closer to getting any answers. How much longer do you think this case will sit on the shelf before it's considered a cold case? What a disappointing and head-scratching end to Jason's story. His family finds solace in knowing that Jason is in the afterlife with the Lord that he faithfully served. And that is all I have for you. These overalls should finally be finished by the next episode, and if they're not, then I'm just gonna keep trucking along until they're done, I suppose. But I feel like I've been working on these forever, but probably just because I only work on it when I'm with you guys. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today, Scissor Sisters. I so appreciate you being here. And don't forget to come back soon because we will be talking about the Slender Man stabbings. You know, the ones that were in the news recently that everyone forgot all about until it was back in the news recently. So be sure to come back for that. Until then, don't forget to choose kindness where you can, and I will see you all later. And this is about as far as I've gotten on my overalls so far. I think I'm gonna go ahead and start working on them off camera just so I can start moving this along a little bit more. But like I said, don't forget to choose kindness where you can, and thanks for hanging out with me. Bye.